Hello and welcome to the first ever IAB UK Gaming Upfront. I'm James Chandler, Chief Marketing Officer at IAB UK, streaming live, quite unbelievably, from our office in central London. So whether you're watching on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter or YouTube, a very warm welcome this afternoon. So over the next hour and a half, you're going to hear how gaming's popularity, particularly in the last 6 months under lockdown, has reached new heights. With takes from Activision Blizzard Media, Anzu.io and Bidstack on the different innovations within gaming and what you can look out for and what's up for grabs. Some of this space will be all too familiar for some of you, some of it largely untapped. So without further ado, let's hand over to Jan from Activision Blizzard Media to kick things off.
Hello everyone and welcome to the IAB Gaming Upfronts. This session is titled The Changing Face of Gamers. My name is Jan Boyko. I am the Head of Market Research at Activision Blizzard Media. And in today's session, we'll be walking through some fresh research that our team has done recently about the gamers in the gaming industry at large. In a moment, I'll also introduce Peter Jacobs, a client lead at Dentsu, who will be joining me for a short discussion. But to kick off with, we're going to be starting off looking at these research findings. And there's a bit of background about the gaming industry. So the gaming market is currently attracting well over 2.7 billion consumers, according to Newzoo research, and that equates to about 1 in 3 consumers around the world. If you think about the kind of image that comes to your mind when you think about what a gamer is, you might start to think about a young teenage male, potentially still living in their parents' basement, with a headset on, eating Doritos and drinking Mountain Dew. But when you're thinking about 1 in 3 people across the world consuming gaming, and in the UK, actually well over 35 million Brits are consuming gaming, that's well over half of the population as well, that just doesn't add up. There have to be other demographics that are now consuming this entertainment medium. So what we've been doing as a gaming company and as a media team has been educating the industry on what gamers look like in 2020, how they're consuming gaming, and what that actually means and translates into marketer and advertiser value. So often the perception of gaming and gamers doesn't necessarily match reality. So to go into the research methodology itself, we conducted some online quantitative research in December, January last year going into this year, and we surveyed well over 21,000 gamers in the US, UK, France, and Germany. Since then, we've done a bit of qualitative research and a few smaller scale quant studies, but for the most part, the results you'll see today are based off that 21,000 survey sample. Our qualifiers are one of the things that made this survey a little bit different. So we spoke to consumers aged 18 plus, primarily due to legal restrictions about different kind of questions you can ask consumers under 18, but also because this is an audience that typically marketers are intending to voice their message to. But the biggest difference we had in our survey sample was in our screener, or in the filter, or lack thereof in this case. The qualifier you needed to have to answer this survey is whether you had played, watched, or engaged with video games in the last month or more frequently than that. And the key differentiator here is that we know consumers are not only just playing games anymore to engage with this medium. Some people, like myself, might not have the same amount of time to play video games as they used to 10, 20 years ago. So I might or flex my gaming desires by watching someone else game, by watching esports, by watching my favorite streamer. Or other consumers might read about gaming news or listen to a gaming podcast. So we want to make sure that our survey sample captures all of these consumers that are tapping into this medium. And then the second differentiator of our methodology is that typically, research companies, gaming publishers, and industry consultants do research on the gaming industry with a very specific focus on platform consumption, genre and franchise interest, and the amount of spend in the gaming industry itself. That doesn't necessarily mean anything to a brand like Coca-Cola or Volkswagen that isn't necessarily interested in how much a consumer is spending in the gaming category. They want to know what the value is to them in their category. So we expanded our survey to include things like motivational statements or perceptual batteries or different kind of attitudes that consumers might have to gamers, the gaming industry, but also to just general attitudes about their own behaviors, whether they're risk takers or eco-conscious or the like. And then there was one final question we asked in our survey, which ended up being extremely important, which is what you can see on the right of the slide here. And that's whether you identify as a gamer. We added this question quite late, and it was quite a simple question that literally asked, do you identify as a gamer? There were 3 responses, being yes, no, and not sure. And that was it. We left it up to the respondent to take that as they would, interpret it as they will, and we analyzed the results therein. So the full detailed findings can be found on our new website. Visit galleryofthegamer.com or activisionblizzardmedia.com and follow the links. But these are some of the top line findings that we found from the research. As you can see on the slide, we found that there were 6 distinct gaming personas. So we ran some cluster analysis using Gower's distance method to bucket consumers using the different number of variables that we had in our survey. And we found that at least in the markets that we surveyed of the adult gaming population, there were 6 distinct personas, which I'll go into in a moment. We found that less than half of gamers actually identify with the gamer label, which I think has big implications for the perceptions of who gamers are and how marketers can actually tap into it. The best way I can go to explain this is perhaps make some comparisons to the TV industry or the cinema industry. You wouldn't necessarily call any cinema or moviegoer a cinephile. They are just enjoying this entertainment medium. But for some reason in the gaming industry, that level of perception with identity versus just consuming the content doesn't exist. So that warrants its own discussion, but an interesting insight that we found out. We mentioned before the stereotype that existed about gamers, the younger males that are still living with their parents. We found that only a small minority of the segments actually fit this stereotypical description of what a gamer is. From numerous industry reports, we're finding now that the gaming industry, yes, it still is male skewed, but it's actually dropped to about 60% to 40% male-female. And the average age of a gamer in the US and the UK has dropped to risen to about 34 to 35 years of age. So definitely different from what the stereotype that exists. And then finally, that isn't super surprising, it has been mentioned before, but we find that the exclusive platform player is rare. But what I think the implications for us is that we have to stop describing this industry and these consumers in archaic platform-specific terms like console, PC, and mobile gamers. We're finding now that gaming consumers are weaving in and out of these different platforms and experiences when it suits them for their different motivations, for different times of day, the same way they're consuming video or TV content across multiple devices and across different media. So moving on to the personas themselves, as I said before, we have 6 distinct personas that we found through this research. What was really interesting, and again, highlighting the importance of that gamer identity question, was that the gamer identity question actually split our segments into 2 big buckets. 3 segments falling into those that, yes, they do identify as a gamer, and the 3 other segments falling into no or not sure about identifying as a gamer. So going through one by one, starting from the top with our super swipers. So this is one of our largest gaming segments. It represents 32% of the adult gaming population. And this segment actually skews female, surprisingly. It also has quite a higher average age, listed here in the late 40s to 50s. Of course, this is an 18 plus sample. So if we were to include consumers under 18, we would be dropping this average age by about 7 to 8 years, which would still bring it into the early 40s range, but definitely higher than what people would expect. And these consumers are relatively new to gaming over the last 5 to 10 years. They're really relying on mobile and enjoying those casual puzzle match 3 gaming experiences, usually using gaming to unwind and relax and just have fun. Our next segment are the dabblers. They are somewhat similar to the super swipers and they have a heavy reliance on mobile gaming, but they have an even gender split. So very indicative of the mobile gaming population, but also the trends that we're seeing at the wider gaming audience at large, moving towards that gender equilibrium. And these dabblers, rightfully named, are starting to flex their muscles into console and PC gaming, perhaps due to being able to connect with their children or friends and family with the gaming medium. And then finally, of our non-identifying segments, and for me personally, one of the most interesting segments is the denialist. So this segment is starting to look more and more like the stereotypical gamer. They are very heavily male skewed at about 74% male, and their average age starts to drop if we account for our 18 plus sample. In reality, this segment sits perhaps in their mid-30s. They are playing more traditional genres like shooters, like sports games, like FIFA and Madden in the US. And they're actually playing a lot with their friends. So they're tapping into the motivation of socialization with the gaming industry. What is interesting is that even though they're willing to admit that they're gaming, because they have to do so if they want to play with their friends, they are not willing to adopt this gamer identity label for one reason or another, or there may be multiple reasons. So this may be due to the stigmas that have been attached to gamers themselves. They may not feel strongly about identifying with anything at all, let alone with the gamer label itself. But a very interesting segment that we uncovered. And then moving on to the self-identifying segment. So these are the three that said, yes, I do identify as a gamer. We start off with our lifestyle list. These gamers actually consume gaming at a lesser rate than our denialists, but are more likely to be in tune with the ins and outs of the industry. So they're following the latest news, knowing what the latest gaming developers and publishers are doing, and keeping on top of their favorite franchises. This segment does skew male, perhaps less so than the denialist segment, but this leads into our next two segments, the player ones. This is the stereotypical gamer that we're looking at here. This is representing about a quarter of all gamers, and they are consuming anything and everything when it comes to gaming. Very much male skewed, playing across multiple platforms, but the differentiator here, what we found with our survey, is that they're tapping into multiple motivations to play. So thinking about socialization, thinking about self-expression, creativity, storytelling. They're using this medium to experience great content, not just to have fun or play with friends. Their motivations and the value that they're getting out of this medium is far greater. And then finally, our next levelers. This is a subset of our player ones, but just aptly named, taken to the next level. They are spending more than 4x the amount on gaming content than their other segment counterparts. They are attending esports events, attending events like the Call of Duty League or the Overwatch League. They're spending big. They're playing games before they even release because they're signing up to betas, and in the know, they might have someone in the biz that can help them out. But very much the kind of upper echelon in terms of gaming engagement seen with this segment. So hopefully that's a very helpful, quick overview of the segments that we found. I think the implications for our industry, which I'm about to discuss here with Pete, is that gamers are multifaceted. You cannot describe or paint the gamer with one kind of brush. There is a lot of diversity to this audience, and a lot of diversity to the experiences and the value they're getting out of this industry. Even though the segments are differentiated, there is a commonality here that all of the segments are playing for fun and to be entertained. This is a great medium to tell some good stories and have some good experiences, either by yourself or with your friends. So that diversity is very important. We know that some of the segments have other motivations for tapping into gaming as well, but I think some of the implications for marketers is that there is opportunity here for everyone. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail now with Peter Jacobs, again, one of my friends at Dentsu. Pete, why don't you introduce yourself very briefly and maybe share some reactions to the research that we've just seen?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Hi, I'm Peter Jacobs. I'm a client partner at Dentsu, but especially focused on being a gaming strategist for our clients. And I enjoyed reading the research because it brought a smile to my face. It confirmed and gave data and facts to a lot of points I've been saying to people for a while. And it really brings home that people are quite nervous by the gamer tag. So often in presentations or meetings, I will ask at the start, who here is a gamer? And you might get a few hands go up, a couple of mutterings here and there. And then you ask a similar but different question, say, who here plays games? And yeah, most hands go up. So there is that slight taboo around being badged as a gamer. And a question to you to start, is that something that you tried to uncover by doing this research paper?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this research didn't just come out of nowhere. We've been looking into this topic for quite some time, but we have seen that stigma or that taboo attached to that gamer label. But at the same time, we've been seeing these industry reports of the growth of gaming and the importance of mobile, even though mobile is largely ignored, I think, by the industry at large, even though it is now a huge reaching medium. We've seen other research that suggests that it's the third or fourth highest reaching app category, one of the most engaging as well. but it's still being ignored as an opportunity, I think, by marketers. So we conducted this research to hopefully better educate the industry, not necessarily to buy against these segments with any targeting, but just to understand that there is diversity here, and to hopefully strip back some of those, those stereotypes and those taboos that this industry and the gamer label has been attracting. I mean, I had the same experience as yourself when I go out to client meetings or lunch and learns, and I ask the same question: who here is a gamer versus who's got Candy Crush or Mario Kart Tour installed on their phone? Pretty much everyone has that, right?
Exactly. It's important to draw out those personas, because when I looked at it, I straight away identified as a lifestylist, and it made me smile, because I'll play games online with my friends, and most of them are deniers, and it's just that there seems to be a slight breakdown there, and it's, from a marketing point of view, it's important to understand how advertisers can tap into that, and to understand that so they can communicate in a better way to their potential audiences. There's, as you say, mobile is quite often overlooked. There's huge areas of gaming and esports which are deemed to be very kind of zeitgeist, on trend, but some of the mainstays of gaming, like mobile, can frequently be overlooked. And I think this paper is important because marketers can get a better understanding of who they can talk to from a kind of a general area. Who are they speaking to when they're advertising through gaming? There's a lot of talk, and myself, I've spoken about it in the past, about what gamers aren't, but what would be helpful to push that conversation is exactly who they are, and that's why this paper's going to be useful for marketers to get their head around the ecosystem and the audience which is out there.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of good points. Personally, I would identify as a player one. I've been gaming for quite some time. I work at a gaming company. It would be kind of weird if I didn't identify as that segment. But I've got a friend, a fashion designer in Brooklyn, New York, who's in her 30s. She wouldn't identify as a gamer, but she recently won a round of Fall Guys, which is a battle royale that has been very popular recently. So she's obviously very skilled at gaming, but is not willing to adopt the gamer label, and we're seeing that happen quite often. And another, your point about mobile is important, and I think your point about esports is equally important. I mean, these events and these phenomena rightly deserve credit, but oftentimes it's almost at the detriment to marketers, because they think that this is the only opportunity that is available. Whereas in reality, there is as much breadth and depth here as any other entertainment medium. This is just this is an entertainment category that consumers are willing to spend their time with. So I'd be interested to hear from you how clients at Dentsu have been activating against this, or perhaps some of the recommendations that you've been providing for brands to get in the game themselves.
Yeah, I think it's always important to start with the understanding that any marketing or advertising within game or around games should enhance the experience for the end user. You need to be a bit more conscious of that and plan for that compared to other channels. So that's paramount for any strategy. But the types of strategies that we've put forward does depend on what the client wants to achieve, and also their maturity within the gaming ecosystem. So there's a sliding scale. I think, to your point earlier about esports versus mobile, you can do both. It's okay, but people often overlook. They want to jump in at the deep end and create their own tournaments and sponsorships, etc., because it's cool. Like I say, it's on point at the moment. But you don't need to start there. There's an easier place to start, and that's through mobile, through digital, through kind of in-game advertising, around advertising. There's a good case study that you guys did with Pringles, where there was a gamification of the end card. You watched the video and then you played a little game at the end, and it achieved massive rates, huge engagements. So you can start there and build up. There's plenty of opportunities within gaming and esports, and it's important to kind of say esports should be seen as a subset of gaming, because it wouldn't exist without games. And you have that sliding scale of digital to working with influencers and talent, to working inside esports, to some of the more unique, bespoke game takeover ideas and game integrations that you can do in the bigger titles and the more interesting titles. So I think it depends what the client wants to achieve, but if you have, like I say, that thought of enhancing the experience and then choosing the right parameters within it, there's an opportunity for pretty much every advertiser to find a game which suits them and their target audience.
Yeah, even within a certain channel or medium, like esports, for example, you could sponsor an Overwatch League team for multi-millions of dollars, or you could buy pre-roll or mid-roll YouTube ads the same way you're buying video inventory anywhere else. There are different levels of investment and ways that brands can start understanding and testing and learning. And I think that's very important, that brands start investing now and testing and understanding what works for them, their brand, their product, and their audiences. Because this industry is growing at a huge rate, and we're going to see this expand with new interactive and immersive technologies like VR and AR come into the picture. And if they don't start investing now, the same way some brands didn't get invested when social was rising, or even when mobile was overtaking digital, they're going to find themselves in a pretty sore spot, I think, in a few years' time.
Yeah, I can completely agree. It's an ideal time for brands to get into gaming because we have the next generation of consoles coming. Technology just keeps evolving and it makes games more engaging, more interesting. The audience is growing. The numbers are growing across the board, especially during lockdown and social distancing. People do have more time to play games. And so it is an ideal opportunity to get into gaming. It's probably the most overlooked mass-reaching channel you could possibly think of. And the creative opportunities within it as well are extraordinary. So now is a great time for brands to look into it. I can completely understand if it doesn't work for everyone, but I think there is a way in and there is an opportunity for each brand to show their personality, their unique view on how they want to talk to their consumers. And they can do that through gaming. It allows and encourages personality when it comes to marketing. So I completely concur as well. I think now is the time to dip your toe in the water.
Yeah, I don't think we could wrap this up any better way, so I will leave it there. Pete, thank you very much for joining me here to chat through this latest research. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of the IAB Gaming Upfronts and what the rest of the speakers have in store. Again, I'll encourage you to visit thegalleryofthegamer.com or go to activisionblizzardmedia.com to see the full research findings. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you soon.
Jan from Activision Blizzard Media and Pete from Dentsu Aegis there. You're going to hear it, I think, again and again and again in these upfronts. The idea of a gamer or gaming and the perception is just so far now removed from reality, and a brilliant bit of research which proves that. Console gamers, PC gamers, mobile gamers, they're not useful terms anymore. Jan was describing it in the same way that we watch video. We just sort of go from platform to platform. We're not really bucketed in to these various segments. And of course, you can't beat a good persona. I love a good persona name in media. Super swipers and denialists were my two favourites. I'd love to know what yours are. Still to come, you can hear from Twitch, McLaren Racing and Zaxis. But before that, to introduce their upfront, it's over to Natalia from Anzu.io.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Anzu.io's Gaming Upfronts. Anzu is the world's leading in-game advertising technology, the only platform to bring ad viewability, programmatic capabilities, and brand lift measurement to mobile, PC, console gaming, esports, and streaming. I'm Natalia Vasilieva, VP Marketing at Anzu, and I'm delighted to be accompanied today by Grant Patterson, Business Director at the WPP Sports Practice. Today, we'll discuss all things gaming, and we'll take a deep dive into the relationship between advertising and gaming. Grant, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, hi. As you said, Natalia, I'm Grant. I work at the WPP Sports Practice, which traditionally is focused on sports marketing, but increasingly as gaming and esports have become a significant growth area for our clients and a sort of area of strategic focus for WPP in general. It's become more and more part of my role. So excited to have a sort of in-depth chat about loads of different stuff that's happening.
So gaming and advertising coexist for a long time, but they never go together or still don't go together hand in hand. There are a lot of myths, misconceptions, and bias around gaming and gamers. What's the current status of gaming in the advertising industry?
Yeah, so look, I think there's a sort of long, as you were saying, a long overdue recognition of the potential that gaming has as a marketing platform or a marketing channel. So, I'd sort of characterize it as it's very much still on the upward curve, sort of nascent, very much a growth space that I think for a lot of clients is becoming quite intriguing. But there's a high level of uncertainty, I think, and clients have a lot of questions and concerns and sort of curiosity generally about the space, which I think is brilliant. I think there's married with that exciting and enthusiastic discussion, there is a need for, I guess, more honesty and clarity about the reality of the gaming space. Like you were saying, there are a lot of misconceptions, and I think what we'd probably call sort of cognitive biases about who gamers are, what the gaming industry is like, what video games do, their benefits, potential drawbacks. And so I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think typically the narrative or the public discourse, particularly in the marketing industry to date, has focused around one particular subsection of gaming, that being esports. And I think the debate about gaming in a larger context has been a little bit neglected. So hopefully we can talk about that a little bit today. But I think it is a conversation that is only increasing at pace. And hopefully that'll evolve into something a bit more in depth and meaningful over the next few months, years.
Yeah, I can't agree more. There are so many uncertainties and concerns around gaming, and yeah, we need to demystify all the nerd stuff that gamers are only the teenagers who play at the backyards. Yeah, that's right. With all of this like issues that we still have and the industry still experiences, how would you describe the current relationship between gaming and advertising in a single word?
Can I have 2 words? If you can give
Okay.
me 2 words, I'd say cautiously curious. So I think there's a lot of interest and intrigue, but I think a lot of that is characterized by, like we were saying, a level of uncertainty, both at an agency and at a client level. So I think agencies equally, arguably feel just as either misinformed or uninformed about the gaming space. And it's difficult to know where to start because it is an industry that is, significantly larger than most other entertainment vectors. So, there's a difficulty in identifying the right place to start that conversation. But I think the sort of inherently curious nature of most marketers means that they are interested in starting that conversation. We just need to help, sort of steer it in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's curiosity mixed up with the necessity to discover the new platforms because the existing ones are not effective anymore. And that's another thing that pushes the industry forward. Yeah, but that's a nice one. Great.
And just on that point in particular, I think a lot of the debate so far has been sort of characterized by, like we mentioned, sort of old, fairly inaccurate perceptions of who gamers are, what they're like, what they do. And so if we can reset, I guess the dial or the way that conversation is happening to move away from, a conversation that's kind of around, well, why gaming, to be, well, why not gaming? Then I think that's a more positive conversation to be having, because then that brings in really interesting conversations about the benefits that gaming has for a lot of people from an educational, mental health, creativity, expression point of view, which is a more positive conversation to be having than just, I'm worried about brand safety, or I'm worried about violence in video games, or I'm worried about, certain tribes within the gaming community.
Right. I guess with over 3 billion gamers around the world, we need to ask the question who are not gamers, right?
Yeah.
Literally every third person is a gamer. As you touched upon brand safety, I keep on hearing from advertisers and across industry that brand advertisers are still not ready to be associated with any kind of violence within games, be it a bit of blood or the shooter games. And on the other hand, I see that the top chart games are actually shooters. So Call of Duty, League of Legends, and even Fortnite actually shooters by nature, which makes it clear that shooters and violence are part of the pop culture. So do you think the advertisers' bias towards violence in games are fair?
Yeah, so look, I think when we talk about bias, I think that's just a natural sort of consequence of the debate that's been had in the media for the last 20 years about video games, and particularly violence in video games. It's been a highly politicized issue that I think oftentimes has been used as a bit of a political weapon for a variety of different groups in the political sphere. So I think it's important for us, when we're having a conversation about the potential pitfalls or the potential dangers of violence in video games, to sort of step back away from that sort of old, unfair narrative, and to look at the science, and to look at the sort of culture within and around these games from a open-minded perspective. And I think when you look at the science, when you look at recent studies carried out at the University of Oxford or a variety of different organizations, there's very clearly not a connection between violence in video games and violence or violent approach to life or violent activities. So I think it's important that we disconnect that to begin with, and then I think it's also important that we sort of reset the way we talk about gaming versus other entertainment forms when it comes to violence. I don't think there isn't nearly as much emphasis placed on the role that violence plays in film or in TV. And how that relates then to potential knock-on effects for the people consuming that content. So it's fair to say that video games are a more immersive and participatory medium, but as we were saying, there's no evidence that makes violence in video games more problematic from a behavioral point of view. And I think it's also really important that whilst we're having that conversation about violence in video games, and understandably brands are concerned about that, it's also important that we talk about that the benefits that video games like that have for a lot of people. They are in many ways cathartic. They are very positive in terms of mental health, in terms of social experiences, playing with friends in communities, and the positive benefits that can have are usually kind of secondary to the discussions about violence. But I think it's understandable brands have those concerns. But I think let's have that conversation in a sort of larger context of the benefits of games and the reality for what games like that do for people and for the communities that participate in them.
Well, right, first of all, violence is part of our life, unfortunately, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can't admit it's, if we're talking about brand safe environments in general. But I think there is a certain level of violence that games have, and this violence is not associated with something bad, and that's actually what holds back like most of the advertisers to give it a try.
Well, I think there's two extra things there as well. Is in the sporting world, obviously there are a huge number of sports that feature some level of violence to one extent or another, whether it's NFL, rugby, mixed martial arts, boxing. But when we're talking about violence in that context, we're talking about it through the lens of honest competition, sort of social interaction, the bonds that people can create through participation in contact or combat sports, and the benefits that has for individuals from a again, mental health, lifestyle, fitness, well-being point of view. So I think it's also important that we bring video games into that conversation as well, and consider them equally through that lens. And I think secondly, it's also important for brands to understand that there is a big spectrum of video games or video game content, and shooters and video games that contain often very pastiche sort of playful or silly levels of violence. there's a huge long tail to the gaming industry that doesn't feature that at all, right? So hugely popular games like Little Big World or Dreams or Minecraft, Fall Guys is the more recent example. These are games that are hugely popular, not because they feature violence or lack a violent component, but because they're creative and social and sort of collaborative and help people come together to create shared experiences. So again, I think it's important that we broaden that conversation to include, the whole spectrum of video game content rather than just, one or two or three of the most popular titles that happen to feature violence.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we touched upon, violence is part of the video gaming world. And you know that gaming has evolved from subculture into pop culture. And again, if shooters are part of it, then we cannot omit it, right? What about other cultural aspects of gaming? And are there any more elements or things that brands should be aware of before they say yes to this medium?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question because it opens up a big discussion about, I guess, the cultural impact of video games. And I think it's important for us all to acknowledge that gaming has had a fairly underappreciated impact on mainstream pop culture for decades. So whether it's the arcade culture in the 90s, the emergence of home consoles in the 90s and noughties, right through to the bigger sort of open world social network style games of today. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the sort of I guess the big tentpole elements of pop culture today wouldn't exist if it wasn't for video games. So fantasy literature, sort of graphic novels and comic books, that sort of whole ecosystem of fantasy culture probably wouldn't exist today if video games and video game adaptations hadn't sort of laid the groundwork for that in the early 90s. Similarly, social media, a lot of the mechanics of social media are derived from video games. So whether that's semiotics, reward mechanisms, the compulsion loops of that define social media, all come from video games. And similarly, the streaming services, your Netflixes, your Hulus, your video streaming platforms owe a debt as well to the sort of the video consumption mechanics that again were sort of the groundwork for those was laid by things like Machinima and using video game engines to create content and stream that live. Again, years before Netflix or Amazon Prime existed. So I think there's a real cultural legacy there. And I think second, coming back to what you were saying earlier about, the sheer volume of gamers globally means that, if one in every two or one in every three people plays video games in some form, then clearly that is a significant part of culture. They might play different games, they might play different titles, but those video games are becoming cultural behemoths in their own right, whether it's League of Legends, whether it's Call of Duty, whether it's Fortnite, whatever. They're becoming, I guess, cultural totems that are evolving into video games, into literature, into ecosystems of content and experiences. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that because the next Marvel Cinematic Universe might well be League of Legends, right? The next Minecraft might be the tool that democratizes architecture, design, and engineering. There's a big conversation to be had about what the future of games like Fortnite and Roblox are in terms of the idea of the metaverse or a sort of virtual civilization that increasingly technology is enabling us to take part in every day. So I think there is a legacy impact that games have had on culture that's probably slightly underappreciated. But as the gaming industry continues to grow and evolve, that's only going to become more significant.
That's an interesting one, that just we can track all of the elements that were needed for gaming to boom now, probably. And that's where we stand. You're right, we can never guess what's coming next since it's a super, like explosive space. And with all of the tech advancements and all of the creative opportunities, it's difficult to foresee, and that makes it even more exciting.
Yeah, but I think it's fair to say that that these sort of that video games have become cultural sort of tent poles, and they're not going to go away. They're only going to increase in their influence and impact on culture. So it's important for us to understand that now and start to figure out the role that brands can play in that.
True. Well, Anzu as a company has been around for 3 years, and I can tell you that even within 3 years, the perception of gaming, the perception of in-game advertising has changed a lot. And as we are, getting back to the early times, and even Barack Obama used in-game advertising for his 2008 campaign, right? Even then, it was like 12 years ago. So advertising in games has been around for a while. The same is with sponsorships. But only now advertisers have started to consider gaming as another effective touch point in their communication with the audience and in their media strategy. Unfortunately or fortunately, because this mindset shift has already occurred, and that's super good news. But what do you think gaming still lacks to become a well-established ad category and a media channel?
Yeah, that's another good question. So I think unlike the sports or film or TV world, gaming hasn't had 10, 20, 30 years to create a fully professionalized marketing services functionality or capability, and it's trying to catch up very quickly to understand what it is that advertisers want, how they can then provide that, and how they can commercialize that in a way that's financially beneficial in the short term and sustainable in the long term. So I think naturally that's going to take a little bit of time to figure out. So I think there is a bit of a gap presently between what advertisers or brands want and what publishers or game developers are currently able to or willing to provide. But that gap is closing all the time, I think, as publishers realize that there is a significant and growing brand appetite for to be involved in the video game ecosystem. And gradually, again, as we were saying, as the video game industry becomes more open, more sort of egalitarian, more democratized through cloud computing, 5G, mobile gaming, a shift away from individual content one-off purchases, sort of pay and play, to subscription-based models, game passes, season passes, microtransactions, etc. As it becomes more open, as it becomes more competitive with Google and Amazon's cloud version gaming platforms come live, then increasingly I think publishers are going to shift to a more advertiser-funded model, and that is when that gap between what publishers can provide and what brands want is going to decrease. But a big part of that is also the marketing industry doing a job of helping understand what brands want, communicating that to publishers, and then working together to develop, whether it's partnerships, advertising inventory, technology, data, products, etc., that are going to help make it easier for brands to find ways to communicate with gaming communities.
Yeah, that's a great standpoint. I totally agree. As an in-game advertising provider, as a NetTech provider that helps to bridge this gap, we are also happy to bring what is needed for the brand advertisers to tap into gaming and to develop their strategies successfully. Great. Thank you so much for the discussion. It was really fascinating to hear all of the history and all of the elements that contributed to the development of gaming. That's an interesting angle around the cultural aspects of gaming. And as discussed, that would be great to see what's coming next in the gaming advertising love story. And I'm sure that everybody is eager to explore this. And I'm also sure that 2021 will be the year of gaming. That's what my gut feeling tells me.
Well, I think the 2020 decade is going to be the decade of gaming. I think we can both agree on that. As for what's next in the love affair, I think closer collaboration, more partnership, and better education, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating time. Thank you for the great discussion. It was Anzu.io Gaming Upfront as part of the IAB UK Gaming Upfronts, and I was accompanied by Grant Patterson. Thank you for being with us.
No problem at all. Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Natalia.
Thank you.
We love bold predictions from Upfronts, the decade of gaming. You heard it here first from Grant. I really liked how they tackled the debate around brand safety, around violence in games. Grant saying it's important to ask those sorts of questions, and advertisers are right to do that, but we should look at it in the context of loads and loads of the benefits that gaming brings as well. And I really love the acknowledgement, this link between pop culture and gaming, how things like the streaming platforms, Prime Video and Netflix have borrowed lots of cues, as have lots of the social media platforms as well. I should have said at the start, Natalia was as socially distanced as it could get, literally interviewing Grant from her bedroom in Israel, where at the time the country was in entire lockdown, so literally just couldn't leave the house. But it worked beautifully, as I'm sure you'll agree. We move on now to our final upfront, featuring McLaren Racing, Xaxis and Twitch, and a little bit more of me, I'm afraid. Here's Bidstack's upfront.
Bidstack empowers brands to place advertising into spaces that sit naturally within video games. Whether it be a trackside hoarding in a racing simulation, a pitchside billboard in a football game, or a poster within an open world, our technology enables brands to programmatically buy brand-safe advertising spaces within virtual landscapes. Bidstack's proprietary technology works cross-platform, enabling native in-game advertising to be deployed across mobile, PC, console, and cloud gaming. Until now, billboard spaces within gaming environments were hard-coded, meaning regardless of who you are or where you are sat in the world, everyone saw the same ads. With Bidstack's lightweight SDK, those advertising spaces become dynamic, meaning that people can be in the same game at the same time but see different targeted advertising. Once our technology is within the game, our game developer partners have full control through our ad console to accept or decline any advertisement. Comprehensive reporting is also available for both game developers and advertisers, allowing them to track, report, and forecast in real time. Media planners can utilize their existing media buying software and their favored DSPs to target set age groups, locations, or use game-specific data to push the right content at the right time. Advertisers can run campaigns within selected titles, targeting a demographic profile within games that are the most appropriate for their campaign. Bidstack operates as the media owner, securing multi-year exclusive deals from the world's largest gaming franchises and best indie developers, making the Bidstack network the only place to buy. This is Bidstack, and the future of in-game advertising is finally here.
We've heard so much about audience, and I think it's going to be such a common theme throughout all of these upfronts, but there still is this stereotyping that's happening around gamers, and it's not always helpful, I guess, Adam, to try and label someone as a gamer. Perhaps there's different, better ways of doing it.
I believe so. I think there's this stereotype of the gamer which is pretty outdated, that a lot of brands still arguably have within their heads. We prefer to think of this kind of segment as digital natives, and that they are people who love interacting with environments, and they've only ever known interactive environments as they've kind of grown up. So they're far more, in terms of their behaviour, they're digital natives rather than just gamers. They've got a host of other interests as well. Not just gaming, they're into sport, they're into music, they're into fashion. And we're seeing that on Twitch. We're seeing a host of different brands realise actually that this audience aren't just a gaming audience, they're a digital native audience. They want to interact with the content. So we've seen, even last week, we had the likes of Burberry on Twitch, which is a brand you just wouldn't think would kind of just fit in with a gaming audience, but they're not seeing it as a gaming audience.
It's the luxury thing is fascinating, actually, and I've been, maybe it's my own bias, but I've been surprised by the number of luxury brands that you see in games.
Yeah, it's really taken off. You've seen not just kind of Burberry on Twitch, Louis Vuitton have been in League of Legends, Porsche launched a car on Twitch. I think the reason for it is that a lot of these forward-thinking, innovative brands are beginning to realise that actually, firstly, you've got to look at the future consumer, and you've got to pay attention to this consumer very carefully and kind of build them up from now. And also that you can have a different persona in the digital space to the physical space, while still maintaining kind of that premium and luxury persona.
Julia, within Group M, you've got a whole plethora of auto brands. The same, I guess, is for autos, perhaps, in that perhaps some of these consumers aren't of age where they can buy a car, but I think autos in particular recognise that they are going to be a future consumer, so are in the right place. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So it actually surprised me that a lot of our auto brands have acknowledged the fact that gaming is an opportunity for them to connect with their future customer, right? So the younger audience isn't really particularly looking to buy a car at the moment because they don't have the budget for it. They probably don't need it at this moment. But at one point of life, they probably need to buy a car. And when they're at that consideration phase, they really think of their experience with brands. And if your auto brand is in that particular game where they had such a joyful moment with that brand, they're really starting to build relationships for the future, and they're really starting to work on that brand love. So yeah.
We should stay on autos with McLaren, of course, at least typically in the sort of the real McLaren world, sponsorships and things like that are brilliant for doing a great awareness job, great consideration. Has that translated into the esports side of things as well?
It's 100% translated into the esports side of things. I think that over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, we've had so many more brands talking to us because they can see this future consumer. And I think for us, they see McLaren, what we're doing in esports, is actually quite a good test bed because they're not too sure about some of the fantasy or shooting titles and whether they're brand safe. And I think it's an easy journey on the sports side, and you can see the guys with the wheels and it looks so close to the real thing. So we're definitely seeing a lot of the benefits of that at the moment, which is exciting for sure.
You're doing loads of stuff. You literally have training camps for drivers. I mean, it's as real as it can get, isn't it?
I mean, one of the things which is just pretty mind-blowing, the F1 2020 game, you can get more data out of that than you can get out of the real car. So we've got teams of data analysts when we go and compete in something like F1 esports who are looking at lap after lap after lap to try and get those extra tenths. So we're taking it really seriously on that side. And I think it's interesting for the fans to see how much people are putting into it as well.
You're an ad guy in a former life.
Yeah.
And I was a mobile guy in a former life, and I went through that whole cycle of mobile in its very early days where you're slightly getting patted on the back as you left the room and a bit of a test here and there, the idea that people would start to buy things and transact on their phones. You would have had the same with things like viral videos, you know, make me a viral video, make me an app. Do you feel like gaming is in that sort of place now?
Definitely. We have brands coming to us and they're kind of saying, we need an esports strategy and we need it really, really quickly. And we're sort of saying, wait a minute, let's think about what your objectives are and what you can, add to the community, because it is a community and it's a community that really praises brands who can do things that are authentic. So I think it's exciting to see, and I think for brands who can actually think about what they're going to give that community, there's massive rewards that can be had.
And there's probably no esports strategy in the same way you don't need a viral video strategy. You need a strategy with an esports element. Lewis, we're obviously sat slightly distant than what we would be usually. We've got some people joining us virtually. We would be remiss of us if we didn't talk about the fact that we've been sat at home, probably doing a lot of gaming in the last 6 months. Talk to us about gaming during COVID and some of the behaviours you guys have seen.
Well, I think what we've seen is a lot of brands have had to press the pause button, in all honesty, during COVID, and they ripped up their media plans and said, actually, I need to figure out a different tactic. Outdoor advertising was under stress, obviously, cinema, things like that. So they needed to force themselves to readdress how they're going to hit their audience. I think gaming was, around the edges of, yes, we want to test this and we want to dip our toes in, but I think it's brought it to the forefront of their mind that they really do now need to take it seriously as a channel, because there was so much press about the uptick in the consumer like playing games a lot more. I know that Global Web Index brought out a survey during COVID, and they found that it increased at least 24% among every audience, and it rose to 50% among millennials and Gen Z. So, and it found that trend is just going to continue. It's not like a flash in the pan habit. It's going to continue. So brands really needed to follow that trend, and I think there's a big advantage that we're going to see, back end of this year, next year, that where brands are now going to invest more in it and figure out what they can do in gaming.
Adam, talk to us about Twitch under lockdown. I mean, already you were seeing, before lockdown, you were seeing some enormous figures, and not obviously just in gaming, but people with concerts and gigs and all this sort of stuff. But how has lockdown been for Twitch?
It's really accelerated the interest in Twitch and gaming as well. I think what's happened is that we're social beings, and we want social interactions, and and things like community social interactions that we used to, cinema, go to football matches, go to gigs, they've been taken away from us, and we really need those, and we've been looking for those in digital environments. Like Twitch, which is a community-based kind of live platform where you can enjoy that kind of community experience, but also gaming. Games like Fortnite and Valorant and Fall Guys are all these kind of amazing experiences where you can come together in as a community in live environments and have that social connection. Previously, which was thought of as antisocial, but actually people are beginning to, it's normalising it as another way that you can maintain those things that we need as humans.
Julia, come back to this point we were talking about with Leeson. Where does it sit in terms of agency land, and is there lots and lots of appetite for this, or are you still going into rooms as this innovation gaming person having to do that big kind of education piece?
Well, it really depends. I think it literally has spiked interest of our advertisers, right? So we're really trying to assess how conscious they are of the gaming ecosystem and how well they actually know where to place their own brand, because they all know that gaming has been growing over the past months. They know we have debunked myths. We know there's female out there gaming. We know we can measure everything. We know that it's a brand safe environment. Advertisers are aware that gamers are okay with being exposed to an ad as long as if it's executed the right way, right? So it's our job to educate them and make them aware of where to place their brand in the gaming ecosystem. So if you place it on a funnel and you have the top layer of the funnel, that's literally where you place mobile gaming and the casual games. 70% of the gaming population sits there. The audience is heavily skewed towards female. 2/3 of moms are actually active in gaming, and that's really interesting because they have a lot of decision power, which makes it very appealing to brands, and it's really a reach play in that top tier of the funnel. And when you move a little bit more down, you typically see the native ads in game, and that's where 40 to 50% of the gamers sit. They're more engaged with the gaming culture, and that's for brands where you can typically create awareness, where you can create brand affinity, and where you can really stay top of mind. Moving a little bit more down, and you actually see people streaming themselves or watch streams, and when you arrive at that little corner at the bottom, 5 to 10% of the gamers sit there and really identify themselves with gaming. And it's really important that we address all of these audiences differently. But by creating a funnel, it makes it more digestible for our advertisers to understand where they can enter in the gaming ecosystem.
Yeah, we were talking about luxury brands a minute ago, Adam, but not all brands are equal in this space, are they? Some have got the right to play, others may struggle a little bit. Are the ones that came in early, that sort of put the legwork in over sort of 2-3 years before we've now got this boom, is it really starting to pay off for some of those brands?
I think so. I think you only have to look at a brand such as Wendy's, for example, the kind of burger chain, who they've been in gaming and supporting gamers, and supporting streamers, and supporting communities, and that's a big thing within the gaming kind of ecosystem, is that support. And by being in there for that length of time and doing the right things in that space, it gave them the right to now appear in Fortnite and kind of destroy freezers and win a can of iron, and have kind of their character in Animal Crossing, and just kind of gamers accept that because they have earned their right to play in that space.
We were talking about Wendy's and stuff they've done smashing up freezers. Anything you've seen that sort of caught your eye? We're a bit shy about talking about brilliant work in digital. Telly and cinema and outdoor do it brilliantly. We're a bit shy. But now we're not going to be shy. We're going to talk about brilliant things. What's caught your eye?
Okay, brilliant ones. Well, it's interesting that, again, another burger brand in Burger King and what they've done recently, which I'm assuming some of us have seen now because it's going around social media. But what I really like about their most recent sort of campaign that we're talking about, they've sponsored Stevenage. They've got the Burger King brand on that shirt. They're in FIFA 2021. They're supporting goals. They're supporting people winning the Champions League. And they've gone into FIFA 21. They know that it's all about that sort of gaming and sporting culture. And actually, they've integrated themselves in a way which those fans can really, really enjoy. And I think what's also really exciting about that is they've played a long game there. They had to sponsor Stevenage a year or so out to get into that game. So they've really thought about the best way for them to enter. So that's what makes that a really enjoyable piece of content.
Yeah, I mean, another brand association that really caught my eye was Gucci and with Fanatic, where
another luxury brand.
They collaborated on bringing out that, you know, a branded watch that was branded Fanatic, and it sold out pretty much instantly. So it just goes to show that, you know, gaming consumers, you know, are not that stereotype. They do have money. They are just general consumers like you and me and everybody else around.
And is there that slightly unattainable thing, Adam, where, you know, I might not be able to afford the thousands of pounds Gucci t-shirt, whatever it might be, but a sort of a virtual one that I could pay a few pounds for and still, you know, put that on an avatar or a character, you know, that is attainable suddenly to me. I don't need to be able to afford the thousands of pounds thing.
Yeah, it's there's a blurring, especially for this generation, between the offline and online lives, and their kind of digital personas are part of who they are. So by brands, kind of luxury brands, are getting into this space and realizing that actually kind of digital goods kind of hold a significant value to this audience, and that they can keep the premium nature via means of scarcity and other things like that, is a really interesting kind of future economy, I guess, for a host of brands to be thinking about kind of deeper level associations in gaming.
Another brand that I would tell people to go and have a look at if they're thinking about joining esports would be 100 Thieves. So what they've built is a brand which essentially, it sits in esports, it sits in lifestyle, it sits in fashion. They're sponsored by Cash App, and Cash App have essentially built them a training space and a content house. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. It's very similar to kind of like the TikTok house. It's just looking at getting its fingers in different pies in all of those interests that the gamers have, as opposed to, right, I'm just going to play games. No, we know that gamers like Travis Scott and burgers and all of these other things. It's like, let's actually talk to them about some of those things as well, as opposed to just buy this skin, etc.
Some fantastic burger chase, burgers and luxury. This is what it seems to be. Julie, just come back to the sort of the agency and advertisers things that you talk to. How do you prove to them that it works?
Well, actually, the first question I ask is if they are aware of that, if they start with gaming, that they're entering the gaming experience, right? So whenever they want to start a campaign into gaming, they should really be aware that it's not about the brand, but it's to add to the experience of the gamer. And it's really to make sure that they participate in the game, but they will not take over of the game. So there's a couple of things they really have to have clear in mind. What is the objective they want to achieve, and what is the audience they want to reach? Because for each subset of gaming, that can be different. So how we approach it is that we make sure that our advertisers are aware that we have a network of gaming publishers we work with, so they can advertise on brand safe inventory, that they can measure the outcomes they want to achieve, and that they can conduct brand lift studies to achieve ad measurement effectiveness. And that's very important, but also what message do they want to bring across in that advertisement, right? It depends in what environment you're playing. If you have a native ad, you really want to make sure that you have a very simple message that's blended into the game. You don't want to take away from the experience of the gamer. You really want to add value. So an advertiser and agency should really consider that if you place an ad in a billboard, Does that add reality to the experience? Does it make it more believable?
We're on to quick fire round. Upfronts obviously is all about what we're getting excited about next year. I'll start with you, Adam. What's the thing in 2021 that you're most excited about in gaming?
I think 2021 is going to be the biggest year ever in gaming, principally driven by the console wars. We've got PlayStation 5 coming out, and the new Xbox, the recent announcement by Xbox of kind of acquisition of the Bethesda. It's going to be huge.
Julia?
In terms of measurement, I'm really looking forward what will happen with the secondary audiences, right? So what happens that if you've been served an ad while you're playing a game, and what happens if someone is streaming that actual gameplay? What does it do to the brand exposure? What kind of halo effect will it have?
That's a brilliant answer so far.
Yeah.
Leiston, what about you? 2021?
Well, unfortunately, Adam stole my answer. He must have got that from me. But the console wars are going to be extremely exciting. Yeah. So on that Xbox versus PS5, we've got a new Gran Turismo game, a new Forza game. And I think that people are going to be talking about the blockbuster games coming out the same way they used to talk about, have you seen that new film?
Yeah. And they feel more like film releases now. They're very cinematic.
Exactly.
Incredible. The final word, Lewis, is with you. What's exciting you for 2021?
Well, I think over the last couple of years we've seen mobile, the streaming services, esports teams really start to scale, and you've got a lot of brands wanting to have affinity with those different channels. I think next year, in technology that we've developed, it's going to start to enable brands to actually get into the games themselves in a much more easy access way. So I think that's going to start to build a category within gaming that sits alongside those different channels that we've come to expect with gaming today. So that's going to be really exciting to see that develop out.
And Bidstack's still very much in startup mode. Yeah. So 2021 is going to be sort of even more exciting than what it's been already.
Yeah, we should just start to see publishers and games start to look at ways to monetize the games with ads, as long as they don't break immersion, as long as it adds to the realism of the game. So, and equally, brands are going to see that opportunity to get in front of that audience in a really smart way.
Nice. And that was 20 minutes is never enough for these things, but all that's left for me to say is to thank our panelists. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
And that's it, Bidstack finishing off with a great panel there, loads of stuff covered. The Burger King sponsoring Stevenage in FIFA is absolutely inspired, and if you've not seen it already, go and find that wrap-up video. It's just brilliant how they went about it, completely different thinking, and probably something very different from some of the other things, the loads of things that you've heard already this afternoon. That's it for our inaugural Gaming Upfront. You can watch all 3 sessions back on the IAB UK YouTube channel. If there's anything that you missed or you want to swat up on, or you just want to watch them again. And we should say a big thank you to Activision Blizzard Media, to Anzu.io, and of course to Bidstack as well. But that is just the start, because tomorrow, back here at exactly the same time, you can join us for our podcast Upfront, where you can hear from everyone from Acast, Audio Boom, Bauer Media, Dax, Podfront and Spotify. The talent on show is absolutely mouth-watering. Heston Blumenthal, Rory Sutherland, Poppy and Rabina from Brown Girls Do It Too, the award-winning Brown Girls Do It Too, Frank Skinner, Chris and Rosie Ramsey, and the one, the only, Oprah. You heard it right. You can listen to Oprah here tomorrow for podcast Upfronts. And then even more after that. So next week we get into our full standout Upfronts. So you'll hear from BBC Global News, from Twitter, from Amazon Advertising, from Snap, and of course from Facebook. So we're really only just getting started. All that's left for me to say is thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for all your comments on whatever platform that you've been watching. And we hope to see you again tomorrow.